Hey, this is LGBTQ&A. I'm Jeffrey Masters, and this is a show where we get to know different members of the LGBTQ community. Today I'm talking with Amin El Gamal. He's an actor currently in the new Prison Break reboot. Stay tuned. Hey, Amin.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk. I want to talk about Prison Break, but first, I think we should say that you were also on to one of my favorite shows of all time, The Newsroom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my god, I loved that show.
Thank you for saying that. I didn't think people still remembered that.
Oh, really?
show.
I remember your role exactly with Jeff Daniels, like talking through like the Skype.
Talking through Skype,
Because
yeah.
you were in Egypt in the show, right?
In the show, I was in Egypt. In reality, I was upstairs from the newsroom in a half-room set.
But did you get to meet him?
Oh, yeah. We rehearsed in person. I shot for 3 days. We rehearsed in person, and then I would go upstairs into literally like the stairs of the newsroom, and it would open up into this like soundstage space of nothingness.
Right.
And they had a half room that was half one room in Egypt and half another character's room, and that was supposed to be in Egypt.
Oh my god.
And we did it live, so we had sort of like a live feed thing going on.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Is it true that after you were cast, you sent an email to Aaron Sorkin about the character name?
I didn't directly, but I asked I asked the costume designer when I was getting my fitting. I was like, you know, this story is really important to me as like an Egyptian American person, and the revolution was very exciting to me. But the character was written in a name that I just didn't recognize the name. And it turned out it was Swahili and not Arabic. And pretty much no one in Egypt who is like ethnically Arab would have a Swahili name. It's just like someone messed up. So it was like, so basically she sent an email on my behalf. She was really nice. I thought he was going to be like, who is this asshole? I had just left grad school, and I kind of didn't expect a response. But he was really open to collaborating to find new names. So I suggested some first and last names, and like gave him the meaning of the names, and he came up with a new name. And there was a few discrepancies in the like factual things in the show, and he was totally open to it.
I think that's really nice to hear.
My God, it felt really. I've had many experiences since that were not where I didn't feel as validated in the business, but it was so empowering. You know, as an actor, especially when you're first coming out of school, you feel like you're the lowest on the totem pole, and the fact that he actually cared about making it factually accurate, I think says a lot about at least the intent of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that you can like see that while watching it as well, or at least I did.
Yeah.
Or I wanted to believe that.
Yeah, there was some integrity. And I think, and funnily enough, I've been thinking a lot about that show lately, because what's going on in the world in terms of how we consume media is so relevant to what the show was trying to do at the time. I don't know if people got that quite, but it felt very urgent for the crew creating the show and for him. And now in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, the way we consume news, and how there's not always two points of view. Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's more than two. That was kind of the point of the show, and we're seeing that that now more than ever that's true.
Yeah, I also like that it had like conflict between a major news corporation and small little bloggers that can do it
Yeah.
on their home. That was interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, I promise we won't spend the whole interview on it, but last thing, I was thinking about the newsroom last week because of sarin gas.
Oh,
in Syria,
yeah.
and that's the only reason why I know what that is. Was
Yeah.
because the show, season 2.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a terrible,
I know, horrible.
terrible situation. But yeah, I'm glad that it disseminated some knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
in a useful way.
Yeah, definitely. So Prison Break. I think it's so impressive how many out gay actors were on the reboot.
I know, right?
Yeah, like it shows like my own biases, but like for such an action series, you don't
I know.
expect it.
I know, because it's such like a mask show. It was really exciting to go into that space that basically was Wentworth Miller was a producer too, and he was coming back, but for the first time to the character as an out actor. So it was really cool being in a show that was almost directly in like the lineage of someone who kind of broke barriers in that way. On not only is it, you know, a lead of a show on broadcast TV, and it's like this action adventure show, you know, and it's a drama. I think those things like almost didn't really happen. That it's very rare that you see one, let alone three, out actors who are sort of leads of the show. So that was cool. And there's another actor, Augustus Prue, who is a British actor who's also out and just got engaged. And the three of us, it was nice. We didn't like, you know, there was no like secret society, but it was kind of nice to have the awareness of other people there. If something, you know, in the script was like, oh, I don't know about this seems kind of, you know, it felt like we were emboldened to try to bring ourselves to the story and to bring our intelligence and our sort of progressive values to the story as much as we could.
That's really very nice.
Yeah, it was a huge luxury. I don't know if I would have survived without that kind of support, you know, on such a grueling show. So that was really cool.
Why was it so grueling?
Well, we shot in Vancouver and Morocco, and a lot of Morocco was like in the desert, and you know, it was pretty hot. We were doing a lot of physical. It's an action show. There's physical stuff. I had to do arms training and boxing training.
Wow.
And I had to learn how to drive a stick shift. Yeah. So like the way I describe it is it was like an unbelievable, like completely an excruciating amount of work. And then we were sort of like in this beautiful hotel in Morocco, and we're doing nothing. So it was these extremes of like luxury and hard work, which is fun. I mean, that's why I'm an actor, is like, I love the challenge, the physical challenge, the emotional challenge, of fulfilling a role in a story, especially if it's not like me, you know. And this character in ways is like me, and in most ways has nothing to do with me. So it was really nice. It was a nice challenge to see, like, how can I bring myself fully to this character that on paper is nothing like me.
Yeah, and so speaking of the character, you have said before you're not interested in playing terrorists. He is the villain, though. From
He's
what
a
we've
villain,
seen,
yeah.
He
Yeah.
villain tendencies, let's say. Why was this character different? Why was this one okay?
I never played a terrorist before, and this one is sort of terrorist adjacent, I would say. I did think a lot about it. It was not originally the part that I auditioned for and was called back for. I was asked after I met Paul Scheuring, the creator of the show, to come in again for this character. And when I first saw it, I was like, this like one-eyed dude who was like sort of, you know, ISIS affiliated and like does these kind of terrible things, as you'll find out later in the show. I was like, there's no way they're gonna give this part to me. You know what I mean? So so when I was offered it, I was kind of taken aback, and I was sort of like, this is kind of in the world of a kind of character I didn't want to do. But as an Arab American actor, my options have been pretty limited in terms of work. So I felt like, because this was a multiple episode arc, and because Wentworth Miller was involved in it, and he was someone I looked up to, and because I liked the first season of the show a lot, I was like, you know, there might be room and space for me to do something with this character that's really interesting. Now, I know I don't have control over the performance and the writing, you know, for the most part, but I was like, this is my challenge to try to see if I can rise to the challenge of humanizing this type of person that we are automatically are like dehumanize, as an acting challenge, but also as a way to sort of make a statement and try to see if we can complicate the narrative on how we treat people in the Middle East.
You're saying so they're not portrayed as just terrorists?
Yeah. On the show?
Yeah. No, I'm saying that you want, like, changing the narratives.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I want to make Arab American characters relatable. That's sort of like aside from acting being ridiculously fun and such a privilege to do, and something that gives me immense joy and fulfillment personally, it's also a way to, I can't distinguish myself and the things that are important to me from being like a somewhat public figure.
Yeah.
So eventually, and I'm not there yet, I think eventually I would like to begin to produce and write content that sort of centers Arab American and Muslim people as relatable, and not necessarily, you know, and as human, not as like we see them either as like these sort of sainted victims, you know, or these like, you know, horrible people usually on TV. So it's very rare that we kind of blur the line.
I think because when we see characters on TV where the ethnicity doesn't matter, it goes to a white actor. Yeah,
it goes to a white actor, or it goes to other ethnic categories that have been more vocal about this, which is great. I think more diversity for everyone is important. But unfortunately, like, they've been calling it the MENA region, which is Middle East and North African. We don't have a strong coalition because there's so many different ethnicities and languages and traditions. There's not really a strong enough lobbying power to go to the studios and kind of put pressure that the other organizations that represent different ethnicities do. So I think that'll change because the census considers us white still. That might change in 2020, but right now there's no we're not really counted. Arab Americans at least.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that affects the way diversity hires work. So, the NAACP can be like, hey, Fox, like, we're going to put some pressure on you. What are your numbers for casting? But there's no one really doing that on behalf of that region in the world, which is really diverse, as it includes like Turkey and Iran and North Africa and the Arab world, but also like people from Israel, or who might not be identify as white, which is there's like ethnic Jewish Arabs, or like Mizrahi Jew, stuff like that. So that's a whole or Afghanistan, which is a whole other thing. It's a whole region that's not really represented, that right now is considered white. So what happens is we don't go in for, we're too ethnic to go in for the white roles. But when it comes to all ethnicity, we're not considered a diversity hire. So we're not considered ethnic enough to give them sort of the brownie points they need to not get a terrible PR or even a legal response.
I mean, I'm continually impressed in the worst way that studios keep casting white actors in roles that are Middle Eastern descent, and that
or Asian.
or Asian. I'm impressed that like there's so much bad PR and yet it's still happening.
Yeah, it's happening less. I mean, on Prison Break, not everyone is Arab who's playing Arab. There's someone who's Indian. There's a Turkish person. There's a Persian guy. But they're sort of in the world. I mean, I think it's like a step better than, step better than being like, let's give him a tan and dye his hair black.
Yeah, I guess you are at a unique vantage point in Hollywood since you see all the roles that come up for like Arab Americans.
I mean, I don't know if I see all of them, but I see a lot of them. Unfortunately, we haven't quite made the shift yet. I mean, I think this year so far, I've still seen roles that are like, and I've asked not to do terrorist stuff anymore, so I don't know what's out there in that world. But I see roles that are like still affiliated with the conflict, or who are CIA informants, or who are and I'm I like to pride myself that I'm able to do that stuff, but it also just kind of it just exhausts me. So there was one role, and I realized that when there was one role on a show, Transparent, which is a show that I love, and they were looking for a Middle Eastern actor, and I remember reading it and being like, oh my God, I can just be American and not have an accent and sort of like be my, I was just like, wow, this is what it feels like to be a white actor. It was amazing. It was really amazing.
And that's the first time that happened?
This year, of the auditions I've had this year, most of the time I'm like, okay, I have to do my research on the CIA, like wow. I have to translate 5 pages of Arabic,
So I know you worked on Transparent. Was that the role?
I did, yeah. And the way that show works is it's very improv-y, so I didn't really know exactly what I was getting myself into. So my role is not that big, but it was really fun because it was just fun being on that set, which is unlike any other, in that it's not hierarchical, really. I mean, there's obviously like Jill Soloway's calling the shots, but there's this feeling of like they start every day on set with something called box, where you stand at anyone in the crew, any of the extras, any actor, anyone can stand up on the box and just say something to the whole crew. They really afford themselves the time to be really open, and
they do that every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. Every
single day someone leads it. Like the first day I was there, Gabby Hoffman led it. The second day, Jill Soloway led it. It was kind of amazing, and they're very inclusive, obviously, of everyone, and everyone sort of has a say. And I didn't know this, but at least when I was working on it, they would write a script, but then it would go wildly wherever it goes, wherever the kind of the wind would take them. So it was it was exciting and challenging, but also sort of like, I'd never seen anything like it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So your like queer sides and your Arab side, in so many majority Muslim countries, it's still capital punishment to be gay.
Yeah.
Is there tension there for you?
There's tension there in terms of my own, having grown up in that religion and feeling sort of self-hatred because I was told it was wrong. I am American and I can't speak to what's happening in other countries, but I can say that if you look back, if you take a look at the Quran, for instance, like there's no instance where it says that homosexuality is wrong. I think the part that's interpreted that way is Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a story also in the Bible. And ironically, the Muslim world was relatively open to transgender people who would be considered transgender now, and gay people. They played different roles. Like I think they were like singers and matchmakers, and they were pretty open, and it was sort of okay. Obviously, it wasn't an identity at the time. The first time there's a homophobic interpretation of the Quran was the 13th century, and it was a scholar who kind of started this first sort of very militant idea of what being Muslim is, but in response to like a threat, to the Muslim world at the time, which was like the Mongol Empire. I think they'd taken Baghdad or two cities like that. So we see this repeatedly in terms of misogyny and homophobia, that like when power is threatened, people decide to oppress other people in order to maintain control. So I think that was sort of the first seed, and even then it didn't take on until the 1800s, when Wahhabism sort of started. But again, in response to Africa and the Middle East being chopped up and feeling like they needed power, but actually they were trying to emulate the Western world, which was very heteronormative. And in the industrial era, they were like, how can we compete with this? And part of it was like, maybe if we follow this model of being very strict in terms of sexuality, and we can maybe catch up with the Western world in terms of...
They learned it from us.
Yeah, I mean, there's accounts where in the 1800s where explorers are like marveling at how they're faulting the Muslim world for being so open to LGBT, what we now call LGBT people. So it's pretty fascinating. So again, it's like it's political, and it's ascribing certain things to a religion because then it maintains a certain power.
Yeah,
it's like a power struggle. So now it's become embedded culturally in a lot of these places and in terms of laws, and it's tragic for me to watch here. I feel very privileged to not, my parents are from Egypt. I feel very privileged to have been born here. I don't really know what my life would have been there.
Yeah.
I mean, they have random raids. They like stalk people on dating apps, and then the whole thing in Chechnya, which is not the Arab world, but it's like a Muslim region. It's heartbreaking, and I'm not really sure what I can do about it. I know what I can do is share my story and try to help American Muslims who are struggling with their gender identity and sexual identity.
Absolutely. I think that in terms of visibility, you're working on two fronts, like in media, you're like out and proud, but also in a more personal aspect, like with your friends, but also like the support group I know you run.
Yeah, we just had it on Sunday, actually.
And that's for LGBTQ Muslims.
Yeah, so it's LGBTQ and questioning Muslims and people of Muslim background. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of people, me included, were like, oh, I know certain things. Like, I know as like a queer person that this is who I am, and I can't really do anything about it. So if there's a God who's saying that this is not a right, then obviously this is not true. And so you kind of leave the religion, and you're sort of robbed of the experience, the cultural experience, the sort of rituals. You're sort of like, no, that's it, I'm done. And I'm still a fairly secular person today. I wouldn't say I'm very religious by any standards, but I was like, but I came across this organization called Muslims for Progressive Values around when I was doing the newsroom, actually, and my like brain sort of exploded. I was like, wait, you could still be proud of who you are and on all fronts. That's amazing. It was very moving. My mom actually, I think, is the one who shared that organization with me. And I think through Twitter, the executive director reached out to me, and we were thinking, like, should we do some sort of artistic collaboration or something, that we tour a show? And what we landed on was something that apparently she had a hard time finding someone who was comfortable being a leader of a support group, like a very simple and pretty confidential kind of thing. And I was like, what? I would do that in a second. And I had facilitating experience. I was like in way too deep, but I'm really, really proud of what the group has done. I facilitated it for about 1.5 years, and then I passed it on to some people. I thought it was time. And now I'm back in a sort of like co-facilitator capacity. I think doing it by myself was not possible.
Yeah.
But I'm really proud of the work. There have been like friendships and communities that have been built there, some relationships. I think one guy from Bangladesh who was on a student visa at the time, we were able to help him get political asylum. I don't want to take credit for that solely, but I contributed to that. So I think, and it's also just, it's its own form of activism to sort of be like, there is no space for someone like us, and for these 2 hours, we're in this room, and all we're doing is telling our stories, and we're finding sort of like a sanctuary in each other's stories and sharing these experiences. And then sometimes we get dinner, and then sometimes we do other fun things around town. But it's a very diverse group too. I mean, you do like LGBT Muslims, of course. There's Egyptian Arabs. There's Arabs from other part of immigrants who are Arab and Arab Americans. There are South Asian people. There are white people. There's Latino people. There's black people. Like kind of every kind of person.
That's wild.
There's just, and that's the thing, like, Muslim is a religion, not an ethnicity. And so there's like white people who are converts, or Latino people, or black people who came in through the Nation of Islam, or who didn't, or more mainstream Muslim. So it's kind of, it's very humbling, and I've learned a lot about it. But I really started the group, first of all, because I needed it. I was like, I didn't have anything like this. And also I felt like, if we're all going to be afraid, then there's no progress is ever going to really be made. Someone just has to do it. And I just didn't feel afraid. So I was like, I didn't feel, I was in a state of privilege, I guess, because I'm out to my family, and I was out in pretty much every aspect of my life. And I didn't care about anyone knowing. Whereas a lot of people in the group are not in that boat because they don't have the privilege, because their parents are in Bangladesh, or they want to maintain a relationship with their parents, and it's sort of unspoken. They kind of know, but they don't. And or they're going to be cut off. And I just feel like when I went into the group, I was like, everyone needs to come out. Like, you're a coward if you don't. If we don't have visibility, then things will never change. And then facilitating the group, I realized that it's really a matter of privilege. And who am I to say what's right for one person, as long as I can try to let them know that there's community out there, and their kind of mental health and well-being are safe, I guess.
That's big.
Then that's kind of all I can't force someone to be an activist and to be out if they can't be.
And you never know when it's safe, like you said.
Yeah.
To come out.
Yeah.
Are there other queer Muslims like in the media or that they can look up to?
Yeah, there are. There are.
I don't want to put you on the spot, I guess.
No, I'm trying to think. They're not necessarily. They're not in. There must be entertainment somewhere. I don't know if they're out though. I'm sure I'm missing someone.
I can name only one queer Arab person, but they're not a Muslim. That's Omar Sharif's grandson.
Oh yeah. Right, but that's and that's different. I think the Muslim thing is also it's like a whole other stigma. It's like stigma upon stigma. I'm trying to think, and I can think of people who, like, there's a Imam Dai who's in DC who has sort of a Muslim-friendly mosque. He's not Arab, but he's Muslim and gay, and he's kind of like an imam, which is a kind of religious leader. And there are certainly figures who are more activists. There's a I think he's Pakistani, and I can't remember his name, but there's a filmmaker who made a couple documentaries about queer Muslims as well. But I don't know that I know another person exactly in my position.
I guess that's very telling too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and the other thing is, a lot of people are very secretive. Like, they don't want anyone to know that they have certain, which I understand, They don't want people to know they have a Muslim background, or they're like a certain ethnicity because they're afraid, or they're hiding their sexuality because they're afraid it's going to limit their parts. All of that is exhausting to me. I didn't work as hard as I worked to be able to, like, do the thing that I love, to have to, like, hide under a rock.
Yeah.
Have
you, like, gone towards the side of you more strongly since, like, as the political climate has changed?
No.
Really?
To be honest, no. I've always been this. I mean, you mean like the 45?
Yeah. I just think never before has an administration, they've always disguised their prejudices.
Yeah, but I always knew they were there. I mean, when I was 14, I was stopped like I was on a school trip going to New York, and I was the only person out of 40 students that was singled out. So I always knew there was like eyes on me.
Is that on like an airport?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, at an airport. I didn't miss the crucial
You're fine.
detail.
But that happens a lot, right?
Yeah, it happens a lot, but that wasn't, but it also stuff was happening before 9/11. Like I wasn't in discriminatory stuff. I was just sort of aware of it intrinsically because I was seeing it happen to my family. And I'd experienced some of it, even though like I'm again pretty privileged as like a lighter skinned Arab person, and people don't always know like what I am. But my brother, for instance, faced a lot of racism and continues to in like weird ways. So I was always kind of aware of that. I think I became most vocal probably in college, and I can attribute that to my friend Amanda Gellander, who's an actual activist. I just like support what actual activists do. And she sort of like got me woke, I guess is the word. I feel so stupid having just said that.
No, I like that.
But I remember she was also a theater artist. And I remember at Stanford, there was this big musical where they had two non-Asian actors playing Asian and had like the makeup and stuff.
Oh no.
And this was like 2007 or 8 or something. And we were just like, that kind of like, I kind of had a switch that never turned back. And
that's Stanford. That's such a liberal school, too.
I know, but they don't. But the thing is, like, the theater community was still very divided, and that's why I went to school with Issa Rae, which I think you know. And she was ahead of me, and she was like, this is the space for people of color. She would put on plays. She had a company called Black Stage that did like an all person of color production of Grease. So she was like, saw the need for that in the microcosm of Stanford, and then saw it in the country and arguably the world. She's amazing.
Yeah.
I just like think she's awesome. But my response to the sort of whitewashing of those Asian characters was me and Amanda decided to produce this crazy like radical production of Hair, which I directed, which we made non-binary. We like changed the entire script probably illegally and made it like very like contemporary, because some of it is pretty dated if you read the actual Hair script. And that was my first time putting kind of my art to work beyond like going to a protest, which I think is very important too, but it was just kind of a different approach. But to be completely honest, my mom also had a big part in it, because she was very vocal when she saw something offensive, like in like Naked Gun. She's like, these are really offensive like Arab bad guys that are very one-dimensional. You shouldn't watch this. When she used to read to me and my brothers, and we were reading the Narnia trilogy. And at one point in the books, I don't really remember, but all the bad guys are like brown or swarthy and like have turbans. And she was like, all right, we're done. I guess it was like Crusade, maybe like influence. I'm not sure, but she was like, you don't need this.
Wow.
So I became aware of how representation is important. But it's not to say that it didn't affect me. I don't remember what your question was.
Well, tell me this. There are a lot of misconceptions around Muslim people, as an understatement. One, something that I see, tell me if this is wrong or not.
Yeah.
I perceive the Muslim community to be a quieter community.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's whether they've been silenced and made to be invisible, or is that like a natural inclination?
I think it's probably a combination of both, but I think not all Muslims obviously, but a lot of Muslims are immigrants or first generation. And in like a lot of immigrant communities, it's sort of like toe the line, don't rock the boat. And that's sort of what we were taught. Like, don't talk politics, don't talk personal. I don't remember the last thing. My grandpa always says that. I don't remember the last thing. Or religion, maybe. And that was sort of a survival mechanism, sort of like show your allegiance to this country, don't get in an argument, be nice to everyone so you can make a living and survive. There's a new generation of Muslims, though, that are very, very progressive, that are very connected to movements like Black Lives Matter, who speak out really openly on social media. And I think there was I don't want to get this wrong, but I think there was a statistic that like of young Muslims, they're like the most pro LGBTQ in America.
That's big.
Yeah, so it was something like that.
I just think when a community like this is quieter, it's easier for the media and politicians
to take over the narrative.
Yeah, to cast them as a villain.
Yeah, and that's also why it's really important for people in the Arab American and Muslim communities, there's not one community, to encourage their young people to if they have, you know, inclinations in the arts to be like, do it, get better, try it out, instead of being like, you will fail and you're horrible and this is not real, it's not a real job, and you know, it's all about medicine and engineering, you know.
That's like every minority community now.
I think I know, but I think that's true. But I think because maybe, I mean, there are Arab Americans that go way back, to and main, I think more in Dearborn area in Michigan, much more than like in California, at least in the community I was in, which was mainly immigrants and their children. And Muslims go back to like the slave trade in America. So like,
was it you? I saw some stat that in like Louisiana, like 20 to 30% of slaves are Muslims.
that's a stat of all the slaves that were stolen from Africa, that it's possible, but there's no way to really verify
It's just a massive number.
Yeah, you would say like 15 to, it's considered 15 to 30, but no one really knows. I mean, that's the connection between like Black America and activism and like Islam, is like, you know, Malcolm X, which is like a sort of a different thing, but the Nation of Islam is a little bit like a little bit different, but they're all connected, and it all has to do with going back to your roots and being like, who am I? You know, why was I not allowed to have the experience of this religion, which my ancestors may have had, I guess.
In terms of Islamophobia, do you think that your queerness and or being perceived queer has protected you from that, or have you experienced it just as much?
Well, I'm weird because some people like perceive me as white, which is like boggles my mind. But I get, or they don't really think about my ethnicity. So I get to be sort of undercover in different spaces sometimes.
Huh.
So there has been homophobia in the gay community because it's perceived that the religion is against them because of the horrible things that Muslim majority leaders do to their gay citizens. So there was one screening of that filmmaker whose name I can't remember, his movie, that was him going to Mecca, and he's a gay Muslim, and he was sort of like skeptical about it, but he was having kind of a spiritual, trying to see like, can I be gay and go to this like spiritual, pilgrimage, like, I don't know, it was like I guess a sort of an experience that he wanted to put on film. And there was two like older white gay guys who were just like, they would not listen to reason. They'd be like, it's a barbaric religion and it hates this and it's the Stone Ages and it's evil, and like, I understand it to one level, but I think at the end of the day, it's just perpetuating the same like hate. You know, it's all about either justifying yourself or trying to find someone to blame or trying to have power, so you like oppress another group of people.
Oh, I actually meant it in the reverse way. Whereas
sorry.
No, you're totally fine. Whereas like if somebody sees a Muslim person and there's like a false concern, or they're wondering like, are they safe? Then they like see maybe like something that presents as queer, and they're like, it normalizes that. Like it takes away the threat. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to because I don't, you know, like I'm not a woman. I don't cover my hair, and my family doesn't really do that. So I'm not perceived right away as Muslim. I don't think someone looks at me like, you're a Muslim, you're an Arab American. My brother has had some experiences like that. He's not queer, but so I don't know. I think so. I think me having lighter skin, I think me being like pretty, you know, American. They're saying being pretty. Me being pretty.
Being pretty.
Period.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't think that's
okay.
I'm not sure. To be honest, I'm not sure.
That's okay.
Yeah, because I just haven't been in that experience.
No, that's good.
But I feel like maybe that's shielded me in some ways. Other ways it hasn't. I mean, I was like crossing the street in Burbank, not far from here actually, yesterday, and someone like sped by in a truck and was like, faggot, like go home, like fuck you, faggot. And I was like, this still happens. Like I'm on TV tomorrow. I've done all this work.
You're on TV beating
people up. I'm in California and this still happens. Yeah.
Sometimes when that happens, I just want to be like, okay, but how did you know?
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't question that because I was wearing, like, acid-wash jeans.
Oh, yeah. But, like, the last time I was yelling faggot like that, I was wearing, like, shorts that were not short and, like, a sweatshirt. And I was like, what gave me away?
I don't get it. I don't understand. So, I mean, I, like, worry about homophobia in other countries, but then I'm like, you know, there's a lot of homophobia at home still. I mean, even though the public opinion is sort of turned in the last few years towards being more accepting, there's still work to be done.
Yeah, I think it's enheartening seeing the protest after the Muslim ban.
Yeah, I was really inspired by that. I felt really like yes, like thank you, I was really grateful for that.
Okay. Tell me about something positive, which is not that this hasn't been, but uniquely, singularly positive. Is that seeing ourselves on screen we know is important and change lives, but we're also able to connect to people who don't look like us.
Yeah.
I think a good example for you is like Judy Garland.
I knew you were gonna say that.
What is it about her that attracted you?
Well, I have to say, like, I think I first saw her in The Wizard of Oz, probably.
Same, yeah.
I think probably. And I was 4? But something about watching that movie, I immediately had this like absurd connection to it. And I think it was playing on TV, and then I demanded that my mom find it. And we went on this wild goose chase, I remember very distinctly, like looking for a copy of a VHS of The Wizard of Oz. And then I wanted like the one with the special features. It had like the deleted jitterbug scene or whatever.
That's amazing.
And I just was really, I guess obsessed is the word. I mean, it sounds negative, but I read everything I could get my hands on about her. I've seen every movie she's been in. I think I own every recording. And when I was little, I could sing every song, and I'd blast music. My poor brother, we shared a room, and he'd be trying to do his homework, and I'd be like blasting like The Man That Got Away. And if I think about it now, I think it's kind of astonishing that I felt that connection, because I didn't know who I was. You don't know who you are, necessarily when you're that young. I think she very easily brings this vulnerability, which I think is like her strength, to her performances, and this feeling that like of overcoming, like you almost like don't know if she's going to be able to continue sometimes, but then like she does, and like better than anyone else, there's like these aspects of her talent and her skill that were really inspiring to me, and that still motivate me today as an actor. And I feel like I've learned a lot about performance from watching her as a kid. I still don't totally understand why I feel so connected, because it's not like the camp thing. I mean, she is, I guess, a bit campy, but I was never like, I didn't find it funny. I found it more, it just gave me strength and like hope, and I felt like I wasn't alone,
Wow.
From her music.
It's just fascinating when people find these icons like that,
Yeah.
not knowing that they're actually gay icons.
No, I didn't even know what gay was, I don't think, for most of that time. And learning that, I was sort of like, I remember my grandma once being like, your dad might not like it if you listen to Judy Garland because she's associated with like gay people. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like what? So yeah, so I think a lot of, I mean, there's also the Stonewall thing. I mean, there's like a rumor because she died the day before or something.
Around there, yeah.
Something like that. The riots were sort of like also fueled by that. I'm not really sure. I don't really know.
The stories like that kill me, where your grandma said it's associated with homosexuality.
Yeah.
I was the same way. We're like, I don't know what this word means. I just know it's negative.
Yeah.
And
I remember being called gay when I was in elementary school and being like, I have like no idea. I literally had no idea what that meant.
Right. And yeah. And then I was called like prep, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's the worst thing ever. And I was like, I guess being preppy is not that bad. I've been called worse today.
Yeah.
No, I agree. There's like the connotations you learn before you go to the meetings.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And I don't think, I mean, it was almost like affirming in a way, because I was like, a lot of times didn't feel like I belonged, and I was very quiet and sort of like, I had a privileged childhood for sure, but I felt kind of isolated, and I was bullied, and I was sort of overweight, and didn't have a lot of friends for a lot of it. But in retrospect, being like, I felt, this attachment to this artistry that other people like me have felt like historically. I was like, whoa, that's kind of amazing, and not in a way that I even can articulate. It's very valid. It was validating when I was figuring out who I was and not sure, and kind of like hating myself. I was sort of like, wait, there's other people who are connected to this in this very like genuine and meaningful way.
Yeah. Makes you feel like a part of the community.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you're not alone. And coming at it from the dark was just like a really beautiful way to, I wasn't like, oh, I'm gay now, so now I need to listen to Judy Garland. It was sort of like I was already listening to Judy Garland, and I was like, wow, this is not something that, you choose or that is put on, or that is, it's like a magical thing, I don't really know if I'm making sense. But
You're making perfect sense.
But it was sort of validating. That and Tales of the City, the PBS miniseries from the 90s that I stumbled on, and it was like, it has Laura Linney and Olympia Dukakis, and it's like very basic kind of as a show. It takes place in San Francisco in the 70s. It's sort of like a soap opera, but it was one of the first times I saw like gay people like in a loving community and like kind of bolstering themselves up, and it was very validating.
You didn't see that even growing up in the Bay Area?
No, I mean, even in Palo Alto High School, there was maybe one out gay guy, and he was in theater, and I kind of knew him. I did know him, but it was still pretty stigmatized. I remember there was one guy in the yearbook that in his senior photo was like, "I'm gay," and I was like, oh. I came out like shortly after that, but
I guess I just like
there was a gay straight alliance, but it was mainly straight people, I guess.
I guess we like tell ourselves like the single stories, and I assumed like, oh, the Bay Area, like you only knew gay people.
No,
yeah, wow.
I didn't grow up in San Francisco. I grew up in Palo Alto, but even so, it's I think considered one of the most educated cities in the country, and I think it likes to think of itself as not homophobic, but it was just a different time. It was a bit of a different time.
That's interesting.
I think things have changed. People are coming out like much younger, and also like even like my younger brother, when I was having the conversation with him, coming out, he was like a football player, and he was like a bully. He was like identified as like a bully in his graduation speech, in a loving way. And when I told him, he was like, "Yeah, whatever, I know, I don't care." Like things are really changing.
Yeah, it blows my mind that kids are growing up these days, and they are going to be out in middle school and high school, and I can't process that. It's
hard to process also because a lot of our identity and a lot of our culture in certain ways, not to be reductive, but in certain ways come from feeling like oppressed or excluded or having to like be like visible as like a signal to our resistance, and if you don't have to do that anymore, it's sort of like, where does that leave us?
Yeah. And a lot of the things about my personality that I like are things that I built up like in like an effect, like growing up gay.
Yeah,
like
either like coded
mechanisms.
signals, coping mechanisms, or like coded signals to know who's like kind of on your side. I don't think those are going away necessarily anytime soon, but I think it's as you get, there's a bit of a loss of that. Obviously progress and liberation is good, but there is a loss when that stuff comes too. That I'm interested in exploring. Yeah. Especially as someone who's on the cusp.
Definitely. Yeah. We have to leave it there, but thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What is next for you? You mentioned the cusp. Anything specifically, or the general cusp?
Oh, well, I was talking about the cusp of like
life,
of like getting liberation, but I'm gonna continue being on prison break for the next like 5 weeks or so, and I have a film on Netflix called Namur that I have a small part in. That's actually a really positive portrayal of Arab Americans, and I'm in a film called Message from the King that hasn't been released yet.
With Alfred Molina?
With Alfred Molina and Chadwick Boseman. Yeah, that's also a crazy character.
Yeah, if people want to find out more about you, should send them to your Twitter?
Sure, yeah. My Twitter is Amin El Gamal, AminelGamal. My Facebook is the same. Instagram is Feisty Pharaoh. Look up how to spell it. It's notoriously hard to spell.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And I'm on Twitter at JeffMasters1. You can also find all of our other interviews on iTunes and YouTube. And if you really want to help us out, tell your friends and comment and subscribe on iTunes. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff. We would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.